All right, I think we'll begin. John, you're still here, right? Everything's connected and okay?
Yes, I'm here, ready.
Okay, cool. All right, so let's get started. Welcome everybody to this special discussion we're having with Deribit, the Bitcoin options and futures exchange, here on WhalePool TeamSpeak. So we've had John and Deribit on a number of times the past couple of years, and we've watched their offering evolve quite a bit over that time. They were the first exchange to properly do vanilla options and a properly liquid market with sufficient strikes and a proper market. So that was that's what Deribit is probably most known for in the space. But they've also been running futures markets and again 100% Bitcoin based. So they've been competing directly with OKX and BitMEX on these things. But more recently, and the reason why we are having John on again is most recently they have launched a Perpetual swap product, which is the first proper competing offering to what BitMEX has been running in the market. And BitMEX's Perpetual swap is a very healthy, dominant product in the market. They are doing anywhere from $2 to $5 billion average daily volume in the market, which is incredibly impressive. So it's about time that we have a competitor in the space. So Deribit last week has launched this continuous payout swap. And also to add to this, the urgency of the discussion, BitMEX more recently had downtime, which was very unfortunate because the market moved significantly in this time. So users of these competing exchanges are getting more and more frustrated, and the demand for a competitor that has a tech stack that can actually scale is getting more and more heated. And so welcome back then, John. Thanks for joining us. So we want to, I guess for those who, so I gave a bit of a brief background there, but maybe you could also just, for those who haven't tuned into our past discussions, maybe you can give just a quick sort of elevator pitch of what the Deribit does and what the Perpetual swap offering is bringing to the table versus the BitMEX product.
Yes, hello. Thanks for having me on WhalePool. Well, a very small introduction to Deribit. We are a crypto derivatives exchange, currently only working with Bitcoin, similar like BitMEX and OKX, offering futures and options. And since a week, indeed, we also launched a perpetual contract inspired by BitMEX, only we've been doing it quite a bit different, not having payouts of funding every 8 hours, but continuously. So there is never a build-up of interest payouts coming out, because all the interest at any moment in time has been paid out already.
Right. So and I'll add a bit of detail on that. So I mean, most people listening to this and tuning in probably are actively trading the BitMEX Perpetual swap. But just as a brief background, so the Perpetual swap is like a futures contract that just never expires. And every 8 hours on the BitMEX model, there's an interest rate that pays out. So if the contract is overvalued compared to spot, then longs have to pay an interest rate every 6 hours to the shorts. And this rate changes every 8 hours depending on how that price varies. So the idea is that if the contract is overpriced to spot, then it becomes more costly to long, and that brings the price closer to spot. And that way, the basic idea of the Perpetual swap is that it just follows more or less around spot, and it mirrors what it would be to have a leverage position in the pair. And so what Deribit is doing, instead of every 8 hours conducting the payout, it's just continuously paying out, and it's based not on the premium over an 8 hour period, but in the instantaneous moment of the price. So whatever the price is trading at now versus the index, that's what the rate is done, is used for, and then it's done in an 8-hourly sort of cadence, so that it still follows BitMEX's overall like interval timing, but it's done in a two key different ways. So the instant rate instead of 8 hours, and it's also constantly changing. It's not, you don't have any certainty of how long the rate is going to be what it says it is. So that's probably the only benefit to the BitMEX model, if you even call it a benefit, is that at least you know what the rate's going to be for 8 hours. But in the Deribit model, it can fluctuate quite wildly, theoretically. However, it has been quite well behaved, though, since it's launched. Is that right, John?
Yeah, it has been behaving very good with similar rates as we've been seeing on BitMEX. I wanted to give one side note. You mentioned that you know already what the interest is going to be with BitMEX. This is true, but there is also yet the other period afterwards building up, which is just as uncertain. All this is also incorporated in the price, so it's a little bit illusionary that you already know what you're going to pay, because the building up interest will also be priced somehow in the current price of the contract.
Yeah, that's a fair point, and in the end, no matter what approach is used, the rates will converge, whether it's a discrete 8-hour payout or if there's an hourly thing or what have you. If in an efficient market, these rates, this market for basis will just essentially converge anyway. But at least in terms of the theory of how Deribit's approach is with the continuous payouts, this is supposed to be a smoother adjustment mechanism. So it's nice to see, since it has launched, it is more or less tracking what BitMEX's rate is and what we observe on even Bitfinex and their rate differentials. Okay, so so let's talk more about the perpetual swap is out. It's trading nicely. It's already got I think it's got more volume now than all your other Bitcoin futures contracts. Is that right, John?
Yes, surprisingly, actually, already since the first day, the volume has been higher than the other contracts, indeed.
So how is that going to affect your offering on the futures? Are you then going to have fewer futures contracts because the action is there on the perpetual? Or are you going to keep pumping out the futures maturities as well?
We are kind of forced to keep future maturities. We might reduce from 3 to 2 futures. We also have an options exchange. Well, it's part of the exchange. Options traders need to hedge with futures with more certainty than hedging in the perpetual. So we absolutely need also the futures with an expiry date, specifically to support the options market.
Okay. So let's talk about more of these, because everyone wants to now compare Deribit and BitMEX. They want to figure out, because BitMEX, as everyone who trades on BitMEX knows, they have significant scaling issues which lead to order rejection errors and all kinds of downtime and unreliability and all kinds of things. So traders have gotten quite frustrated, and they're starting to look at what the competitors have to offer. OKX is has their own problems, as we've seen this year. They've had rollbacks and massive clawbacks and all kinds of manipulations, shenanigans on there. So that's not necessarily looking so great. But then Deribit has this offering now that people are starting to check out, and maybe you can explain to traders why Deribit is different. Why is it that you will not have the same issues that BitMEX has in terms of these auto rejection and scaling things? What is it about your tech stack that is fundamentally different that traders can trust that Deribit's going to be better?
Yeah, well, first of all, I cannot really look into the tech stack of BitMEX. Well, we can just see how it behaves. Our capacity, our order flow capacity of our platform is significantly higher than what we think it is at BitMEX. On the other hand, we have less customer flow on our platform, so we cannot say with 100% certainty how our platform would perform under extremely high load. But we are very sure that our order flow capacity is at least the order of magnitude, so at least 10 times better than BitMEX. Also, our latency is around 10 times lower. I mean, the normal when the both exchanges work good, so when it's not busy, the latency, the response time from Deribit is around 1 to 2 milliseconds, where BitMEX usually is around 20 to 30 milliseconds. Even under high load, we stay at the same latency, but then at BitMEX, the engine, well, we know what happens. There are coming outages.
Right, and so that definitely sounds good. So it's an order magnitude more capacity, order magnitude less latency. Where is your servers located? Because I noticed this morning you guys had a bit of downtime. So BitMEX and others are on AWS West usually. Where is it that Deribit is hosted, and how that improves vis-a-vis latency?
Yeah, the performance of the platform itself doesn't have too much to do with the location. Besides the ping time from where the trader is located, of course. We are currently located in OVH in France. And indeed, we had some downtime last night, which didn't have anything to do with our systems, but with the network maintenance of OVH. This counts for every platform: BitMEX, OKEX, Deribit, or any other exchange. It's impossible to have a 24/7 uptime. Always something can happen. One of the things that we have to do is to move at some point to a data center that gives a little bit better personalized service, because we didn't even know there was a maintenance. The system just went off, and it was absolutely not needed. If we would have been in a, let's say, a data center with more servers, Equinix, for example.
Right. I mean, of course, you can't have always 100% uptime, but in terms of mitigation for cases like this, you could have redundancy set up so that if OVH goes down, you switch over to AWS instead, or something like that. Have you got contingencies now in place for that, or?
No, right now such a contingency is not in place, but we are very close to actually being able to do this. This is not so simple, because we're working with a matching engine that can only be at one place at a time. It's not like a web shop having 2 copies or something. But right now we managed to operate with a system with different nodes, where one node can take over the other. Those nodes could also be placed in a different data center. We didn't do this yet, but we will do so. And then the systems could be switched with a couple of seconds of downtime. But right now, this is not the case.
Okay. So you're in OVH, and the main feature of your tech stack is Erlang, right? This is what gives you these efficiencies versus competing systems, or has that been changed at all?
No. Of course, you could also use a different tech stack. It's not just that the tech stack guarantees the performance of your platform, but indeed our tech stack is basically Erlang only.
Okay. And so one of the things you mentioned before was the insurance fund, and that's another big topic when people are discussing BitMEX, is that, holy shit, how is this insurance fund making so much money? This is like the most successful prop desk in the entire crypto space, but it's just a liquidation engine insurance fund. So it's a lot of people are looking at the size of 11,000 Bitcoin over there and thinking, wow, that's very impressive, and that gives people actually a lot of faith that the market is well backed up, because normally CME and SIBO, they'll guarantee settlement on their balance sheet essentially, In offshore shops like BitMEX, they can't guarantee settlement or OKX as well, so they have this insurance fund to bring a little more certainty to people, a little more better feeling that if there's significant volatility, then there's going to be a backstop at least. And the quantum of risk that is on Deribit is probably significantly higher than BitMEX, right? Because you have this options market as well, which means that if I'm writing some option to someone who's bought it and I can't cover their P&L in the event of a market move, presumably the insurance fund has to cover these cases in addition to any futures market volatility that can't be covered. And I looked at your insurance fund, John, on Deribit lately. It is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I saw 30 BTC. So this is 30 BTC versus 11,000 BTC on BitMEX. How would you have traders feel better about this discrepancy and how they will not have to worry about any kind of strange clawbacks or any other mechanisms that would prevent them from getting their position filled properly?
First of all, I want to say something about the options being an extra risk. It's an extra product, so there is also liquidation risk, but it's not higher than futures. So actually, the options require much more margin. So the real risk or the bigger risk is with the futures, where people can have up to 50 times leverage. With the options, it's basically not more than 10 times leverage. So you get with the options you get liquidated with still more equity in your account than with the futures. So the main risk anyhow is with the futures. As for our insurance fund, it's specifically compared with BitMEX, it's very low. Of course, there is also less volume on our exchange. So, like having an insurance fund of 11,000 Bitcoin would be completely overpowered. We offer also a little bit less leverage, so the chance of big bankruptcies is a bit smaller. And simply, we have a very good history. We've been online for 2 years, or a little bit more now. We've seen the run from, I think it was about $400 to 20,000, back to 6,000. We've had some bankruptcies, but we've never had to socialize any losses. We programmed the system similar like OKEX, where we could eventually socialize losses, but it hasn't been happening so far. So let's say that our track record speaks for us that we have things under control.
So in terms of, just sorry to interrupt about this, so when you say you have similar to OKX with the clawback, so how is your liquidation mechanics then compared to OKX? Because OKX will just basically, if there's a massive liquidation, they'll just put this the unfilled liquidation order to be closed in the order book, and then if it gets filled, good. If not, then that creates the unfilled loss that needs to be socialized. Is this the same approach you're using, or how does it look these days with your liquidation mechanism?
No, I just meant the socialized loss, the clawback system. I didn't speak about how we liquidate positions. How OKEX is doing it is, well, unbelievably amateuristic, or however you want to call it. So we don't just place a limit order in the order book and then hope it gets filled. And if it doesn't get filled, it eats out of the insurance fund. The positions get actually liquidated in real time. We do this incrementally. So we just liquidate a position trying to get maintenance margin back to a level below your equity, and then the liquidation stops. So this also helps to reduce the liquidation flow of orders. But it can never happen like on OKEX, that the order is stuck there and just doesn't get filled. It just doesn't work. In liquidation algorithm sense, I think our system looks more like BitMEX.
Well, So it's actually it's using partial liquidations though, right? So it's not such. Is it such where if you're below maintenance, then the whole position gets then unloaded, or like the way BitMEX does it, or are you doing a partial liquidation to get the margin above maintenance and then you stop if it's not necessary anymore?
Yeah, we do partial liquidations. Well, there is a certain minimum. I think it's, I'll have to look, but I think it's around 0.2 Bitcoin. So if your position is 0.2 Bitcoin, we would just close it straight away. But for bigger positions, we liquidate in 10% steps. So if you have a position of 10 BTC, and your position has to be liquidated, we liquidate 1 BTC and then we check if it's still needed to liquidate further. Any remaining funds in the account remain with the trader. So we don't take over the account straight away. Our insurance fund also has an income. The income with BitMEX is just the whole account balance that remains. We just charge an extra fee on the liquidation order of 0.1%.
Yeah, and so I think that's a key distinction. That so when you say that it's closer to BitMEX, it's actually, in my opinion, actually better than BitMEX because it's partially attempting to liquidate, so salvage the position, and not just simply taking the trader's entire maintenance margin, throwing it into the insurance fund, the desk, and then letting the engine trade out of it in some mysterious way. Instead, you're actually just doing it in steps partially, which is a more orderly approach than both I think OKX and BitMEX. So I think this is a very novel model compared to what's currently out there. Okay, so the track record's been good on that. So even though the insurance fund's rather small compared to BitMEX, there's traders should not necessarily be concerned that there's going to be clawbacks and such. But if there were, for example, on this perpetual contract, a massive loss that occurs, when does this clawback occur? Like, how does it happen if there's no settlement on the perpetual contract, for
example? We settle anyhow every 24 hours. This is not an expiration, but a settlement. So every 24 hours, we have this at 8 o'clock UTC. The system is checking who are the winners and who are the losers, and if there would be a clawback, which never happened, but it's just programmed for. If there would be, for example, 10 Bitcoin more bankruptcies than what the insurance fund can pick up, then those 10 Bitcoins would be socialized with the winners of that session, of that 24-hour session, pro rata.
Okay, so your platform uses this concept of sessions, right? Which is every 24 hours or every 8 hours?
Every 24 hours, every day.
Right. So at 8 in UTC, this also impacts. So this impacts profit settlement as well as the perpetual swap payout. So again, Deribit has a continuous payout versus BitMEX, and that means as soon as you enter into a position on Deribit, you're already paying out or receiving funding right away. You're not having to wait every 8 hours. It's continuously and instantly paying, but this builds up for the day and then gets booked on this 24-hour settlement period. So even they'll still be available to traders as the funds are flowing in, but in terms of when it actually gets booked, this is also at the 8-hour settlement period,
right? At the 24-hour settlement period.
Oh, sorry, yeah. I mean 8 o'clock daily settlement.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no. This daily settlement really has no influence at all on anything other than if there would be a system loss to be socialized. The moment of doing that would be at this 24-hour settlement. This is also the reason that unrealized profits are only withdrawable after settlement. So because they could be socialized, which never happened so far, but that's the reason of the settlement. Another thing, the unrealized profits are directly available for further trading. Just for withdrawals, they have to wait for settlement.
Right. So that's also a key difference between BitMEX. So on BitMEX, if you're trading at lunchtime and you got a bunch of profit, you can withdraw that right away. But on Deribit, you'll have to wait until the following 8 in the morning UTC settlement before that those funds are available. But at least you can trade with them right away, which is also similar to how OKX approaches it. Okay, so following with this comparison to BitMEX, then the other point that people make about them is that they're not willing to launch on altcoins the transferability of the funds. So, for example, they've recently done this Ether dollar perpetual swap, but it is a Quanto contract. So you're using Bitcoin as the margin, and then you're trading dollar value contracts. They get converted to BTC, and it's there's so many different dimensions. It's a bit confusing, and it would obviously be much simpler if people could just use Ether margin to trade Ether dollar inverse perpetuals. OKX and crypto facilities, I believe, also have Ether, which you can use as margin to trade Ether dollar contracts. BitMEX has come out and said that they're actually not comfortable holding ETH in their required setup of having a multi-sig, which is a fair enough. There's good security concerns. If you are requiring multi-sig, you don't really want to use these parity libraries or other problematic setups where essentially a multi-sig in the ETH is a smart contract, and that means that in order to doing the signing, you have to actually send, you have to call methods within the smart contract from different accounts, and I think the BitMEX guys prefer to have a completely offline signing setup. So what is Deribit's position on this? Are you guys willing to embrace transferring non-BTC assets and using those as margin in derivatives products, or are you following this BitMEX mentality that Bitcoin is the only thing secure enough to really handle this amount of money?
No, actually, we are right now. This would be our next big release. We are working on offering also Ether products based on Ether collateral. Yeah, if you would ask what is the safest coin to hold, then it would be Bitcoin. Maybe not specifically because of the multi-sig, but also just because of the safety of the coin, the network. That doesn't mean that something less safer is not safe enough. So we will be embracing Bitcoins and specifically Ether. That will be the first one, and maybe also other altcoins as collateral.
And would it basically be following the same products you're already offering, where you have options that are inverse and futures, or are you thinking about maybe even a peer-to-peer lending market, a la Bitfinex and Poloniex, or a sort of multi-asset margin market like Kraken has, where you can pledge multiple forms of assets as margin, or what sort of products can we look forward to with these new assets?
Well, first of all, with Ether, it will be basically, well, you could even see it as a completely independent extra Ether exchange, where Ether is the collateral, completely separated from Bitcoin with its own insurance fund. A step further, it could be possible to trade also the Ether futures with Bitcoin collateral, or Bitcoin futures with Ether collateral, if there were a spot market on the exchange where Ether could be exchanged instantly for Bitcoin at settlement. But right now, this is something far away. Right now, it will be just separated systems. There is a chance that we would also start working on a spot exchange.
Right. I mean, it would be cool to have the spot exchange and then settling through that with the multi-asset, but I guess the only issue there really is liquidity becomes a huge dimension in the model, and that becomes more difficult to handle the risk and all that stuff. But I think it would be strong enough, given that BitMEX is unwilling apparently to embrace these other assets. There's clearly a market for it. OKX has products that offer this and the crypto facilities, but there's still not that much action going on either of these. But I think there's definitely room in the market for this. So that's good that we'll see, I guess, in the coming months an ETH version of the exchange. Another big reason why people trade on BitMEX is that it is, to their credit, it's the most liquid exchange for Bitcoin dollar in the entire world by far. It exceeds by over an order of magnitude the volume that's on the spot markets, and that's obviously, it's not the same when you're not actually trading real Bitcoins for real dollars. It's a synthetic product, so you can't compare apples and oranges, but nevertheless, it is a reliable, generally reliable market that is very successful, very liquid. Deribit's order books obviously aren't as thick, and there's not as much action going on there, but how are you guys looking in terms of liquidity provision, and how many market makers are on there providing quotes, and whether or not people should be concerned that they get into a big position and then your market maker runs away and then they're trapped? So maybe you can talk a little bit about what you guys are doing to handle liquidity.
Yeah, liquidity has to grow by itself. There is not like one market maker on our platform. Actually, there are just anybody can market maker on our platform. There are no preferential treatments whatsoever. We offer even right now, 200 requests per second by default to anybody connecting through API. So there are lots of market makers active, of course also connected with their bots to BitMEX, OKEX, and all other exchanges. So the liquidity can easily be taken from those other exchanges. As for BitMEX liquidity, when things matter, their liquidity, or when there are big moves, their liquidity kind of also dries up, in the sense that you cannot even post your trades anymore. That didn't happen yet on Deribit, where trading always has been going fluent, besides downtime. But our book has to grow, of course. It's getting more liquid every week. Specifically, the Perpetual has been very liquid, specifically during the weekdays. In the weekends, some market makers are not quoting yet, reducing a bit the liquidity in the weekend. But specifically for the Perpetual, it's looking very good.
So, given the success of this Perpetual, it seems natural to launch like an Ether BTC pair, or like altcoin, where you're using Bitcoin margin, but you're trading the altcoin versus they're quoted in BTC. What's the obstacle to just running one of those, given that this has been a success on the inverse Bitcoin dollar pair?
Actually, no obstacle at all. We just didn't get to it yet. So for sure, there will be also futures with Bitcoin as collateral on altcoins. Yes.
But not just futures, but specifically perpetuals, right? Because BitMEX, for whatever reason, doesn't have perpetuals on the altcoin versus Bitcoin pairs.
Okay, honestly, I didn't specifically think about it, because it's not on the agenda the next 6 weeks. We'll have to think about that. But the Perpetual is a very successful instrument. So right now, I see no reason why, indeed, there couldn't be a Perpetual between two different coins.
Yeah, I think just a brief note. So a couple of years ago, BitMEX did their ETH versus XBT Perpetual, and I think back then, and I was also had different ideas of how to design these models, and was thinking it had to be based in Bitfinex lending rates. That would be the solid market derived source of this, and I think that was BitMEX's initial approach as well. And I think because that data source was a bit chaotic, the market rates were too volatile, that it was not well behaved. But I think this component is probably not necessary. I think that given that the market will determine that rate without there needing to be necessarily as a lending rate source for this. So even though BitMEX currently doesn't run these kind of products, they have in the past, and I think given that we've seen how the perpetuals behave in the current market, that I think it should be fine. But I think that'll be interesting to see because the perpetual works in that context, it may as well in these others. Okay, so the next thing about the BitMEX is that, and people, I think, broadly appreciate this about BitMEX, that they actually have a strong no rollback policy. So all trades are final on BitMEX. If you get executed because someone did a fat finger or because of whatever, you broadly don't have to be concerned that they're going to roll back these trades and to say, that didn't count. So what is Deribit's policy on these things? Have you ever had a rollback, and under what circumstances would you consider a rollback? And how does your policy compare to BitMEX's, all trades are final approach?
We don't like rollbacks, of course. So in the basis, all trades are final. We've had only some rollbacks in the options. Where we've seen it last week. Some whale, I don't know what was his intention, try to create or try to find a loophole in our risk management system, placing ridiculous orders in the options, which is a less liquid market. And so far our system just allows any price to be traded. So just to give an example, what happened, an option that was worth about 0.3 bitcoins, that was like a reasonable price, it got traded 700 times for 0.95 bitcoins, creating an instant loss in one account of 500 bitcoins and an instant profit in another one of 500 bitcoins. So those two accounts were befriended, probably. There's no proof of this. We don't know who those people are, but we reversed this trade, to give an example. It was completely ridiculous. We could improve our systems, of course, to make those trades impossible in the first place, but we didn't implement this yet. But to give an example, we reversed this trade.
Yeah, so I think, and there were a couple traders talking about this. I think this concerns people that this is not automatically handled. Because rolling back ex post facto is obviously not as efficient as having safeguards in place to prevent it from occurring in the first place. So what are the efforts looking like to prevent that from happening? So, because otherwise someone could do that right now again, it sounds like, if you haven't plugged the hole. So because this feeds into the whole insurance fund socialized loss risk that traders are considering. So could you try to shed some light on this?
Well, actually, there was no risk to the system, but it's just my it's just my wild guess why this trade happened in the first place. So it needs to involve somebody willing to lose a lot of money or having a fat finger. So right now the policy is that if this is just with the options, with the futures, this is not applicable. If there is a trade more than 0.05 BTC out of line from the mark price, the trader can request us via email to make a price adjustment. This has happened, I think, 2 times now so far. What happened last week with this 500 BTC loss missed trade? The traders were actually happy to keep the trade, but we reversed it because it's just a sketchy trade, complete nonsense trade, and if we start to accept those things, then who knows? More people start to do it for whatever reason. But a real adjustment has been just happening 2 times, so it hardly ever happens. And indeed, it's a manual process where the trader would have to send us an email, but it's happened 2 times so far, so it's very rare.
Okay, and in the futures and perpetual swap context, this then isn't an issue.
No, never happened.
Okay. The other major draw to BitMEX, so you guys also have a maker rebate. So if you're provided, you said anyone can market make, which is the same on BitMEX, as long as you are in the books and you have a passive limit order that gets filled, you receive a maker rebate. 2.5 basis points. So the question then is, and also because people can make an account on both your exchanges with just email address, which is I think really important to crypto people, that they don't have to provide documents and have all these restrictions. I think that's a huge a huge benefit of BitMEX and Deribit. Also, you guys have a similar approach. BitMEX, however, is based in Seychelles, which famously, Arthur has this attitude of just sue me in the Seychelles if you don't like it. Deribit, however, is based now Amsterdam these days in Holland, which is European Union. So how does this jurisdictional consideration affect the risk on Deribit, and why don't you have then maybe a safer offshore jurisdiction to insulate the risk that you're taking with some of these operational decisions of not having document checks and such?
Yeah, right now there are no risks operating in the Netherlands. But it's indeed at some point we will probably move to an offshore jurisdiction, which is actually not a very big deal to do. What we are doing right now is not accepting Dutch customers, for example, because we are in a discussion with the local authorities, the AFM, and so they are aware of our operations here. And in the meantime, we are not accepting Dutch customers.
Well, okay, but even BitMEX, which is Seychelles based, has been cracking down on US clients. I mean, even large traders who are connecting from United States IP addresses on BitMEX, they are being asked to sign declarations that they are operating outside of the US in an entity that is then not based in the US. So so they're obviously getting some heat from CFTC or other US authorities. So presumably similar maybe issues could arise for you guys. So I think that some offshore setup, as you say, is not that hard to do. Some kind of BVI, Seychelles, whatever, just to protect not only traders to be protected, but also you guys. I think it's not. So how do you feel? I guess in terms of the philosophy, that do you think it's absolutely essential that crypto exchanges have this kind of loose requirements, or do you think that a exchange that follows strict KYC AML has a chance to succeed in the current market?
I am of the opinion that an exchange should be able to operate whatever way it wants to operate, and let the customers decide if they like it or not. So as for KYC and AML, I think it doesn't work like that. It's being imposed upon exchanges with rules. But my opinion is that an exchange should figure out for itself if it wants to apply those rules or not.
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think most people here are supportive of that approach. I think everyone values their privacy, especially in this space, and it's important that exchanges don't just so easily give in to the whims of the state to require different things. So I think that's also a huge ingredient in the success of these derivatives exchanges that are offshore. So okay, that was that hits most of the points that I had in mind for traders that were interested to compare Deribit to BitMEX and to compare the continuous perpetual swap to the discrete BitMEX perpetual swap. The other thing, I was looking at your market share for the futures. So this is ignoring the options volume that you have, but you're these days doing like $50 million up to $100 million average daily volume in the Bitcoin dollar futures and perpetual swap. And this is roughly, if you look at BitMEX's, it's like 3 billion. If you look at OKX, after you adjust for the fake double counting volume, it's more like 700 million over there, and so you guys you're at like single digit market share right now. So where do you see Deribit at year end in terms of market share versus these other shops?
We certainly aim to increase significantly our market share. Obviously, for us, in a way, we are content with how our exchange is going. So it's really a huge upside potential, and we will certainly take a bigger share of this.
Absolutely. Okay, so I'll open it now to everyone else here that might have any questions. So I've seen a couple of questions in the chat, which I think I'll just answer because it seems maybe a couple of people didn't listen earlier on. But Deribit's perpetual swap is similar to BitMEX's in that there's a funding mechanism that adjusts the price, but it's paying out as soon as you enter the position and the whole time while you're holding the position. So it's not every 8 hours there's a payout. It's every time, everyone who's in the position at all times is paying some rate, and this rate is determined instantaneously based on what the price is trading at versus the index underlying. And another note, actually, so a lot of people also complain about BitMEX's index. So the BitMEX index is just an average of GDAX and Bitstamp. So it's got two inputs. And that's had a lot of problems over the past couple of years. A lot of people have complained about that. The Deribit index, on the other hand, uses the top 6 spot exchanges for Bitcoin dollar, and then it takes out the bottom outlier and the top outlier, and then it takes the average of the middle 4. And that's a much better index versus what BitMEX has. I don't know if, John, if you have any comments about the index that you guys are using versus BitMEX, but I think it's actually much stronger.
Yeah, well, we've had this index since the very beginning. Now the markets are getting a little bit more calm. Well, who knows still when, but specifically in the beginning there were huge differences between exchanges. We've seen flash crashes even on GDAX, I think, or on Bitfinex with liquidations, stuff that you really wouldn't want to have in your index. So we decided to just put enough exchanges in the index that we can leave the upper and lower value out of it at any time. And it has been working very well. We've never been affected by those, let's say, irrational prices on any of the exchanges that are part of our index.
Yeah, this is to have a robust index is absolutely essential when you're using derivatives that are marking the value based on some spot component. So I think traders will really appreciate that as well. So just to reiterate to those who are asking in the text box down there that it's a continuous payout. So the rate, it'll display as an 8-hourly rate on the front end, so you can compare it to BitMEX's, but it's paying out continuously, and the rate is determined instantaneously. But the rate is displayed in an 8-hourly format, so you're more easily able to compare it to BitMEX. So yeah, if you jump into a position $100,000, as soon as you enter, if there's a negative rate, then and you're long, you'll be getting the payout, and if it's a positive rate and you're long, you'll be paying this instantaneously, and it's spread across the entire. It's not every 8 hours, but it's an 8-hourly rate for comparative purposes to BitMEX. So if anyone has any questions, I'll open it up now. So Shot, if you have the microphone working, you can ask yourself. Anyone who has talk permission can feel free to ask John any questions about Deribit's options or their perpetual product or any of their plans or tech stack or any of these topics we've been discussing.
Yeah, John, since you added the perpetual, how do you prioritize the liquidations? Is it going to be perps, then the other futures, then the options?
You mean when a trader has more positions in his account?
Yes, sir.
The liquidations, they are done spread out over all contracts. Well, in the right direction, of course. So if you are net short and there is a liquidation, we would liquidate both the contracts at the same time.
Yeah, and just a reminder for those who might have missed it earlier, when Deribit is liquidating, it's not like BitMEX where they take your entire maintenance margin and it happens in one big shot. They actually do it gradually in an attempt to salvage as much as possible for you. So in 10% steps, they'll unwind your position into the market. So it's a different approach than both OKX and BitMEX.
Yeah, now I understand better the question because traders are used to lose their whole position.
Yeah.
This doesn't happen on Deribit, so we just start to incrementally liquidate both of them, which is also less risky because we take the liquidity of both futures, or the perp and the future, and then we basically liquidate the least needed, and then liquidation stops.
Yeah, and in terms of the liquidity provision aspect as well, I mean, we've talked in the past as well that it's not unusual for exchanges to have some market making that they provide just to have basic liquidity. But when BitMEX has been providing and bootstrapping the liquidity on theirs, and the insurance fund builds up so much, there's maybe the appearance by some of perception that there's a conflict. Whereas, and you, John, you said in the past at least that Deribit is providing some basic liquidity on the exchange, but you're not benefiting from liquidations. You're only charging a fee on the liquidation to put in the insurance fund rather than confiscating the entire maintenance margin, and then any alpha generated is just bonus for the exchange and the insurance fund. So that's, I think, a key difference when people are. There's a lot of accusations, some of them unjust, I think, versus BitMEX, but some of them are fair concerns about how the significant portion of liquidity in some of the products are provided by BitMEX, and there might be a conflict there. But on Deribit, you're having external market makers that are quite active as well, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, anyone else, Mayfun or others in the chat, if you have talk power, now's the time to ask John about anything with their new Perpetual product or any of their other plans going forward. Now's the time to ask them. We're trying to have as many places that we can reliably trade on as possible. And so Deribit has made a great offering here. And so, any questions, any criticisms, any feedback, now is a good time to ask John here.
Yeah, I want to say something in between. I'm not very often, or basically almost never, on TeamSpeak. But you can find me easily in the Telegram group of Deribit, and also PM me at any time. So if any question comes up at a later point, you can contact me directly as well on Telegram.
Do you guys have any plans to do any better integration with existing trading platforms like Sierracharts?
Yes, we are actually. We just contacted the Sierracharts a couple of days ago, so we are looking into that. We've received also a huge amount of feedback about our lack of proper integration with Tradingview. So this is also being worked on and should be solved soon, where people can see the Derivate products on Tradingview, and also an improvement of the Tradingview integration on our platform itself.
Yeah, I think the key thing with the charting side integration is that you need to provide some kind of classification of the contracts, because the symbols are updating too much and they don't want to keep up with that. So you have to call it like the way OKX does, where you call it like a month contract, a quarter contract, a semi-annual, or stuff like that, because then you actually have a consistent reference and they don't have to update the API to see the symbol and shit like
that. Yes, actually, I haven't been involved with the work we've done with Tradingview, but as far as I understood, we are doing a more complete integration, which also includes basic trading from within Tradingview website itself. And actually, there shouldn't be a problem. We with what you say, we do not have to use aliases for the contracts. It's not needed with the way we are integrating right now with Tradingview.
Okay. So Tradingview then is getting more flexible, so you don't have to actually use alias.
Correct.
Great, that sounds interesting. Any other questions from anyone with talk power that wants to ask anything?
Well, John, have you guys noticed that on social media such as Twitter, there's talk of a flippening, which is when Deribit will surpass BitMEX's volume?
Yeah, well, we are following Twitter, yes, and there is some ongoing, specifically comparing Deribit with BitMEX. OKEX is never mentioned for some strange reason, but yes.
Yeah, I mean, we're at OKX, and I think their volume is a bit funny. All of their recent trades show as even numbers, so you automatically have to divide by 2 to have some idea of what's even going on there. But I think most people are they're using BitMEX. BitMEX's API offering is the best, so it's more natural to compare you guys to them. And I think WhalePool as a community has always just we like the BitMEX guys. We've known them since 2014. We've had them on here over the years and helped advise on their product development and everything. So we're very big fans of BitMEX and Deribit. We've been talking to you guys for a couple of years, and any exchange that is bringing something to the table of value that traders can use. So whether it's Bitfinex, we like BitMEX, all of these guys. So, and as you said yourself, even Deribit's products are in part inspired by BitMEX. So their innovation, I think everyone appreciates, but at the same time, everyone on the in here is going to benefit from competition. We want more exchanges to trade on. We want more variety of products. We want a variety of systems that people can then choose from. It gives us more arbitrage opportunities. It gives us more liquidity. So we don't want this to be like a BitMEX bashing fest. We think all of these guys have added extremely useful value in the space. So we're happy to promote all of the guys who are adding value, and just as we are helping and bringing value, we'll also criticize when it's necessary. So that goes for Bitfinex, BitMEX, when any of them are having problems, and then it also would go for Deribit. So we just want our interests are just for the space in general to be more liquid and more robust for traders. So last call then for anyone that wants to ask anything of Deribit.
I've got a question about the API. Is that now sort of stable, and should it be considered ready to use?
Our API has been used since the very beginning that we launched the exchange. We have a very stable API with very high rate limits.
Excellent, thank you.
And to clarify, this is for not just a REST and WebSocket offering, but you also have a fix protocol, right?
Yes, we offer fix with raw incremental updates. We offer WebSockets also with actually there is a V2 coming out soon. Actually, it's already there, but it's not made completely public with raw incremental updates. And we have JSON RPC or REST, if you want to call it like that. So we have the 3 of them. Yes. So we are.
Do you have a preference of which we use?
We are specifically geared towards streaming data, and there our WebSockets is taking the lead over Fix. Not in terms of performance, but in terms of functionality. That some things we might not offer on Fix, though the basic stuff is also on Fix.
How big is the team these days, by the way?
Can you repeat? Sorry.
How big is your team these days? Like between developers and the front office guys, what is it? How many employees, contractors?
In total, we are around 10 people.
It's very impressive what you guys have done with that limited headcount. When you compare it to what the overhead that other guys are facing. So I think that's really impressive. So Bear Dog is in the chat is asking about geographical access and restrictions, and the only limitation is this Dutch residents may not trade. Is that correct, John?
Actually, this is not correct. It was just referring to us being based in the Netherlands. We also have a policy of not accepting US customers. and some other small countries from a list. I couldn't even name them, but a couple of other small countries as well, like North Korea.
Yeah, so these like shithole nations like Syria, Libya, stuff like that.
There is one element that I didn't completely understand, but about the partial liquidation. So if someone have a 10x position, how gradually will he be liquidated? At which chunks will he be liquidated? It's not like visible.
Yeah, so we do have a certain minimum amount. So if you have, for example, a position of one $10 contract, well, obviously we would have to liquidate the whole thing. Also, I think the minimum is 200 contracts. So a position of 200 contracts will be liquidated immediately. So the minimum step is 200 contracts. So if your position is 2,000 contracts and higher, then which amounts to what is it, 3 Bitcoin. So any position 3 Bitcoin or bigger gets liquidated in 10% steps. So that means that we reduce your position with 10%, and then the engine checks again if it is still needed to continue the liquidation. Based on your maintenance margin, of course. If your maintenance margin is lower than your account equity, then the liquidation would stop immediately.
And those orders that it would place, would they be market limit orders?
Excuse me, can you say again?
When your account is liquidated, does it implement that sort of via a market order or a limit order?
A limit order. A limit order.
So it's a limit order at the bankruptcy price, or how does the limit price is established in this?
Actually, no. The limit order is not depending on the bankruptcy price. It's depending on the current market. I'm not gonna go too much in detail how the liquidation algorithm works, but the intention of the algorithm is just to liquidate as favorable as possible with the least amount of impact in the market, but at the same time have a reasonable certainty that the order gets filled.
And any benefit goes to the trader, not to to Deribit or an insurance fund. So that's a key difference also.
Yeah, there is just an additional fee which you could see as a penalty to get your position in such a circumstance that we need to liquidate it. So you pay 0.1% extra transaction fees, but for the rest, whatever is in the account is for the trader, also the eventually remaining position and the funds, of course.
Yeah, and on BitMEX, it's a discrete event, similar to OKX, where once you are below the maintenance margin, boom, the whole thing, no matter what the price is at, even if you get filled at a profit, this goes to insurance fund, which I think is a big difference. Okay, we've been now discussing for about an hour, so let's not take out too much of John's time. So if anyone has any, I think someone was asking if you guys are hiring in Holland. Someone on YouTube was asking this. Are you guys hiring, and if so, what positions?
We are hiring, but we do not have specific open positions right now. The main part of our development team is in Poland. If there are very talented Erlang developers in Poland in the same region, because we want to have the team in one place, so not not distant workers, then you should contact us for sure.
Yeah, we have some Polish power here in WhalePool. There's some strong Polish community, so maybe some brilliant coders that might take you up on this. Okay, final call then. Anybody that has any final questions? I mean, John, as he said, he's not around in TeamSpeak all the time, but we can always grab him from time to time, or you can message him there. Very, very open at Deribit. Not any shenanigans going on there thus far. Obviously, we'll keep close watch on that as more and more users are using Deribit. We'll keep the interests of traders at heart and make sure that things are going as they should. But any final questions before we wrap this up from anyone in here?
One question that was asked on the chat box. So once we close our position, we are free to withdraw it at any time, or do we have to wait for settlement, or we can withdraw at any time?
You have to wait for settlement. This is for the profit part of your position. So, for example, you deposit 1 BTC. In that same session, you make a trade, you close the trade, and you have 1.1 BTC in your account. And until settlement, you could only withdraw 1 BTC. After settlement, 1.1 BTC. That being said, our withdrawals are instant as long as our very small hot wallet permits so. So there is not a daily. We have a daily settlement, but we don't have a fixed time daily withdrawal session. It is usually 90% of the withdrawals are being handled real time.
So for future, I have to wait 1 month till expiry date to get the profit?
It's every day. The profit settled every morning at 8 at UTC. So if you make the profit the night before, it'll be available the next morning at 8 UTC, no matter what the maturity is.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. I had I didn't understand this part about futures. I was scared of this, so thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, that's how OKX, the way back, used to do this. They used to withhold the profit for ages, and then they went to a weekly settlement model. But Deribit is a daily settlement at 8 in the morning. So, and this is also a key benefit that John just mentioned right now versus BitMEX, is that BitMEX has a once per day withdrawal policy because they like to keep everything completely offline. Whereas Deribit will, if you are in the evening and you missed the BitMEX withdrawal cutoff, over at Deribit you'll be able to get this withdrawal processed instantly, as long as you're not a huge whale that requires them to dig it out of cold storage. So that's, I think, another big benefit. So, okay, let's wrap this up now. It's been an hour. John has been nice enough to use his time to discuss these quite technical topics with us and to compare their offering with BitMEX. And I think a lot of people are dipping their toes in and seeing how the performance is. And we have established an affiliate relationship with Deribit. So if you want to get a discount on fees, you can sign up for them at deribit.whalepool.io. We wish you all the best, John, with the exciting things you guys have got going on at Deribit with the options and the swaps and the futures. And we hope that you will come back on again the next exciting thing you've got going on, perhaps later in the year as the market share continues to climb. So thanks a lot, John, for joining us, and thanks everybody for listening and for contributing any questions that you have.
Yes, thank you for being on WhalePool, and I'm pretty sure that somewhere later this year we will be back for another talk.
Excellent, great, thanks a lot, John. Mabel, can you cut it at this point then, if you're around? I think that was like 1 hour, 8 minutes.
God bless you.
Yeah,
well, now swap. It's time to interview you.
Yeah, I've been playing around with the swap a lot lately. It's a nice approach versus BitMEX.